Ivy Valentine subscribes to Mark Yoon, so should you. Enjoy your treat!
It seems like we've talked ad nauseum about Soul Calibur 3 and Season 3 DLC, but for those of you who haven't caught up or haven't watched those videos from like 2 years ago, here's a little wrap-up of the reasons why they would move on to Soul Calibur 7 as opposed to Season 3. So we want to start off the jump. There were a lot of like predications that Season 3 was going to be a thing. There were the characters that were already labeled in placeholders in the actual data itself when the game was data mined, those being Rock, Yoon-Song, and Aeon, but beyond those three characters coming back, and still the exception of Lilong being the only character who's pretty much not returned at this point, whether he's been replaced in this new timeline by Maxi or whether he'll show up and have some other part to play is something that I'm not sure about, but we can cross that bridge when we actually get to it. But when it comes to today's specific video, I wanted to talk about some of the reasons why they wouldn't make a Season 3. Now, I've had it brought up to me before that there were a lot of people saying that we're not going to get this game until a long time from now, basically because of, you know, the gap that was between 5 and 6. Now, I've already talked about that before. If you haven't caught up on those videos, there is a mini documentary that I made in the mini documentaries playlist on my channel. It's called like The Road to Soul Calibur 6, A Bumpy Road or something like that. You could just click on that and that'll give you a pretty sufficient explanation as to what went on with that. Also, I've heard it compared to a lot by Tekken 8 and coming out when Tekken 7 specifically came out in like 2015, but I do want to remind you guys that that was the arcade release only. It wasn't on consoles until 2018, which is the same year that Soul Calibur 6 came out. But a lot of people want to focus on that focal point and talk about how modern day games take a lot longer and cost a lot more money, which is true, and I'm not discounting that point. What I do want to say is that there are overextending circumstances when it comes to this particular generation of gaming. The biggest point, in fact, being obviously COVID, because we were like pretty much on pause for like 2 years. Japan had like really strict rules, so any development that was going on was being done at home and having to use like combined servers to send from their home computers in, and there was a lot of like drawbacks to that and a lot of lengthy periods of time where there was not a lot of work getting done because of that. Not to mention the fact of the treatments and such. It took about almost 3 years or so for everyone to finally get back to normal and the normal swing of things, but that's not exactly the reason why, that's just a contributing factor. So the biggest reason that I'm going to talk about is timing. So a lot of people want to go to Tekken as being like Bandai Namco's poster golden boy, and that's the reason why Soul Calibur is not getting as much love, or it'll have to wait until Tekken comes out. But realizing that almost every time there's been a Tekken game released, there's been a Soul Calibur game that's released in that same year, albeit maybe 5 to 6 months after the fact, which would coincide with saying, yes, they don't want to overcompete with themselves, because generally when financiers are looking at product and release times and they're scheduling release dates, because some of these games are done well in advance, they just don't release until a certain point. The reason for that is they pretty much figure that everyone only has enough money for one game, and that money that you're going to spend on that one game is going to go to that one game and that one game only. Then you'll need time to recuperate to get the next game, because not everybody is financially stable enough to get every single game, and they know that. The numbers prove that to them, and competition, even self-competition, does affect that a lot. So if you have two games that are of similar kind of background, or at least have a similar player base, let's say Tekken and Soul Calibur 7, for example, they're going to assume that based on numbers, based on the past quarters, the past financials of the past lifetime of those two games, let's say Soul Calibur 6 and Tekken 7, they're going to say, well, Tekken 7 sold about 10 million copies and Soul Calibur 6 sold about 2.5 to 3 million copies. So if we have a 3 times differential between them and people only have enough money to spend on one game, chances are they're going to spend it on Tekken, and Soul Calibur is going to get thrown to the wayside. That way they would release Soul Calibur later, just so that people have more time to recoup their funds to be able to buy both products and spend on whatever lengthy DLC and online content there is now and going to be possibly. So the reason that Season 3 never came to fruition, in my opinion, the biggest part of that is the console generation change. Soul Calibur tends to come out late in console generations as it usually is. We're not going based on the previous release cycle because it's a completely different story as to now. But if we're looking at Soul Calibur 6 going into Soul Calibur 7 in particular, they like to do it in the middle of a generation of a console. That way it gives them time to play and release stuff on that. Soul Calibur 6 was no exception to this, but by the time Season 2 had finished, which was about, I think 2.5, almost 3 years ago at this point, this December. I don't think it's been 2 years. I think it's closer to 3 since Hwang was released. That was like the last character that they did for Season 2. They had two options at that time, and this is right at the height of like when the pandemic was about to begin. So we have, at least the rules set in place for that. So we have a situation where they have an allotment of developer money for this season, because like I said before in my previous videos, the developers' money for future season passes comes from past season passes, because the money for the base game is already covered in the initial budget, which includes marketing, distribution, licensing rights, all that stuff. But when it comes to the DLC, what DLC you pay for goes into what DLC development is going to go next, and then like investors, all that stuff also. Which is why people tend to usually say, well, okay, we're going to go ahead and we're going to do this because this is more profit for our next development fund. And a lot of times the DLC will actually focus on a bonus for their next project. If they're not going to make a new DLC, they can kind of use whatever they already have left over, try to finagle their way to get people from fans, because DLC is pretty much like crowdfunding. And when you're not making those moves to fund your next game, that's just like an extra subset that they have put aside just in case. So their choices were down to creating Season 3 in a game that's already pretty much out the door. The height of its peak was probably Season 2. But after that, they're going to say, all right, well, when's the next season going to release? We have to look for maybe like 6 months to a year down the road. And what are we looking at that point? That would have been like a year ago, which would have been directly coming into the coattails of Street Fighter 6 and other games like that. Plus the PlayStation 5 was already out. The next generation of gaming was here, and what tends to usually happen is people will focus more on the current generation or next generation than they did the previous generation. That's just what the numbers show. There's a high early adoption rate when it comes to consoles. Unlike other technology, it's like most people will jump on board day one if they can, and then, you know, the scalpers do their thing, and then like you're just waiting for this console, and most people still haven't gotten it yet, or some people still haven't gotten it yet, and most people didn't really have their hands on it for like a year in, unless you had some kind of inside access. Beyond those 2 points, they can look at that and they can say, well, if we release the DLC here, now, in like a year, when the PlayStation 5 is already out and thriving, when our competition is coming up pretty fiercely and strongly, do we want to compete directly with that and possibly not make the money back on this DLC? Or do we want to put the money from Seasons 1 and 2 directly into starting to create the next Soul Calibur 7, and then we can include those characters that were going to be in the DLC, Rock Aeon and Yoon-Song, and we can actually put them in the base roster. That would build up some more hype for our game to be purchased, because there's a lot of people who love some of those characters and want to jump onto them, and then we can actually have extra money besides the budget to start development. There are reasons to believe that they would be jumping on a new engine as well. I know Mortal Kombat far ahead and went to Unreal Engine, I think 4 as opposed to 5 from Unreal Engine 3, which is a little bit weird to me, but I feel that Soul Calibur would definitely want to start porting over their already programmable assets to start HDifying them, which means that they have to blow them up from like a 1080p proportion to basically a 4K proportion, because even if that gets downscaled to 2K or something like that, that's just what they have to do. And then they have to add extra polygons and do surfacing and resurfacing, and there's a bunch of stuff that's involved in just porting over already assets that are there. It's like almost creating them from the ground up, because you have a polygonal based skeleton that you have to add a bunch of extra stuff to. That just catches a lot of other nuances and stuff. It's pretty complicated, but it's kind of easy to understand. But when we're just porting over stuff, then they're gonna have to spend money on that. Then they're gonna have to spend money on whether they're gonna license Unreal 4 or Unreal 5, or whether they're gonna keep it the same and just like upscale it. There's a lot of stuff involved there. So beyond getting to the financial part of that, why else would they not do that? Maybe the financiers just didn't want them to do it, because whenever you're gonna go to the benefactors, which would be the investors that are funneling money into these projects that are being published by Bandai Namco, their boards of directors are the ones that have to say yes or no whether something goes forward or doesn't go forward, and that's based on, like we talked about before, an ROI. It's based on whether they get a return on their investment, how big that return's going to be, because sometimes they just won't put forth the money and they got to find other means or other avenues of funding, which they did with like Soul Calibur 4 with Lucas Games, and they did with previous entries as well. Soul Calibur 3 was almost completely funded by Sony, which is why it's exclusive and always will be. They hold the distribution rights. So there's like a lot of things in there, like their guest characters, they have to pay licensing rights for them, and then like there's cross promotion, and they hope that they actually get the people that come in from the other games that they're cross promoting with to build on their pre-existing fan base. So there's a lot that goes into that, but I think the biggest reason, like I said, was timing. If they released Season 3 like a year ago, chances are we'd be just now recently getting the last character of whoever that is, because it seems like they do these over a course of 6 months to a year. And if we did get that last character, the numbers of concurrent players that are right now on Steam are pretty low. There are pretty healthy lobbies that are set up on like PlayStation, for example, but it still does take some time if you don't already have a Discord that you're a part of, or a Reddit that you're a part of, or some friends that you already have a group that you already pre-designate these times of playing with. There's not that many returning concurrent players. And beyond the players that are just playing online, most of the other players that are actually playing the game are still just doing stuff in Libra, or they're doing character creation. So there are a lot of people that are playing, but not necessarily online. So it may take some time to actually find matches just based on that. But if they're looking at those numbers and they're seeing the amount of people that purchased Season 2 versus Season 1 versus the actual game, that's obviously going to be a lowering thing. Like, more people are going to buy the base game than are going to buy Season 1 DLC, and the more people that buy Season 1 DLC, it's going to be less when it moves on to Season 2, which means that it's going to be even lower when it goes on to Season 3. So there's a lot of like ways behind that. Maybe they have trouble procuring a guest character to cross promote with a game that's been out for so long, because the game came out in like 2018. So there's a lot of little reasons that go into that. But I think if they want to make Soul Calibur 7 as based as possible, as poppin' as possible, they're going to want that Season 3 to roll over into the base game, so that when they're showing their initial announcement trailers, they can put those characters in the trailer and people are going to go nuts, because it's not just going to be like usual Soul Calibur where it's like the base roster that we know and love and then like a few extra characters. We're going to have those characters front and center. They're going to show some new story elements, their new graphics engine, and whatever new gameplay, hopefully getting rid of Reversal Edge or nerfing the crap out of it. Maybe making Critical Edges a little bit more difficult to do, and taking Reversal Edge out of combo strings. Just little gameplay things, little things that make it more competitive, even though it's kind of hard to be competitive when you have characters like Nightmare and Astaroth and Aswell in the game. But it's just basically little decisions that add up to one big decision. And I don't take Season 3 not coming into fruition as it did with like the cancellation of the Cepheus store in Soul Calibur 5, for example. I don't see that decision as being like they're no longer supporting the series. I see that as they are putting all their time and effort and budget and funds into the next entry, because like I've always said a lot of times, Soul Calibur 6 was an application game. It was a game to apply feasibility to Bandai Namco and its benefactors, to show them that our souls still burn and that people still want this franchise to thrive. And they were given their limit of how many minimum sales copies that they were supposed to sell, and they surpassed that, and the story goes on from there. There's far more reasons why the series is going to continue than there would be that it's not going to continue. And every single pessimistic or cynical kind of answer that I've heard from people doesn't hold up to scrutiny. A lot of times I just don't even like respond to some of them, because it's things I've talked about a billion times before. And since like, if you've watched any of my videos for like the 6 going on 7 years that this channel has been around, then you probably already know my takes on that. So it gets a little hard to keep repeating the same stuff in the comment section over and over and over again. Which is why I probably won't be posting my videos to Reddit anymore, because that just seems like a cessbed for negativity no matter what you post over there. I swear you could post like a picture of like a puppy and there's going to be like a bunch of people like trolling you in the comments over there. Like, Reddit is just like a cesspool. I thought Twitter was bad, but Reddit is like brutal. And the poll actually states when do you think Soul Calibur 7 will get an official announcement trailer? The N didn't go in there, I'm sorry. But 17% of the vote said early 2024. This is for an announcement trailer, not the game. 49% of the vote, which was the overwhelming majority, said late 2024 is the announcement trailer. 27%, which came in second place, was 2025. And 7% was my little bit joke thing that said never, I'm a nihilist. And this is out of a pool of 200 votes. And you can see the comments on the screen as we're talking about that now. And if you want to see your comments on the next video, please partake in the vote and comment in the community tab on the end of this video, which will be releasing almost simultaneously to the release of this video. So with that being said, guys, I want to bring this video to a close. I want to thank all the new subscribers for subscribing. I want to thank the members, Ken Trey Game, Matt Said That, Wolf. There's like a bunch of you guys, and like it's because of you that I can keep this going. You can join the membership by clicking below. That's up to you completely, or subscribe. Any of those things would help out the channel greatly. I don't have to say this. I don't even know why I'm saying this. I never say this. But anyway, that's going to conclude today's video. And as I always say, guys, I love it. Thank you.
And thank you.